Life can break you down to the point where you feel there's no way forward. But the truth is, the power to rise lies within you. This is the story of a man who once slept on the streets, with no roof over his head and no money in his pocket, but who dared to dream big enough to change his destiny. Armin wasn't born into wealth, but he carried big dreams in his heart. Like so many others, he moved to the city chasing opportunity, believing that hard work alone would be enough to create the life he imagined. At first, things seemed to work out. He found a small job at a local store, rented a tiny room, and felt like he was on his way up. But life doesn't always move in a straight line. One wrong decision, a few bad influences, and everything began to spiral. He lost his job unexpectedly, and with no savings, his rent piled up. The landlord didn't care about his excuses. Within weeks, Armin was forced out of his room, clutching nothing but a worn-out backpack filled with his clothes and a few personal belongings. At first, he thought it was temporary. He slept on a friend's couch for a few nights, hoping he would land another job quickly. But one by one, his friends disappeared when they realized he had nothing to offer. In the city, loyalty is often measured in money, and Armin had none. Soon, there was nowhere left to go. The park benches, bus stops, and dark corners of train stations became his new shelter. The same city that once filled him with hope now treated him like he didn't exist. He noticed how people avoided eye contact when they passed him by, as if poverty was something contagious. That silent rejection cut deeper than hunger ever could. The nights were the hardest. He would curl up against a cold wall, trying to shield himself from the biting wind with nothing but his thin jacket. Each sound of footsteps, each siren in the distance, reminded him of how unsafe and vulnerable he was. He had fallen to the bottom, and the world kept moving as if he had never mattered. Armin began to question everything. Was this the end of his story? Had his dreams all been lies? But somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispered that this pain was temporary, that maybe this fall was meant to awaken a strength he never knew he had. Nights of hunger and cold. Hunger has a way of breaking a person slowly, not just through the emptiness in the stomach, but through the way it eats at the mind. Armin would walk through busy streets, watching restaurants filled with people laughing, eating, and living lives that seemed a world apart from his own. The smell of food drifting through the air felt like torture. Sometimes, he would stand outside a diner's window, staring at plates he couldn't afford, until the shame became too heavy and he forced himself to walk away. Days blended into nights, and nights dragged endlessly. The pavements were merciless, cold, hard, and unwelcoming. He tried to sleep, but every passing car, every bark of a stray dog, and every chill of the night reminded him that he didn't belong anywhere. His body grew weak, but his pride refused to let him beg. The few coins he managed to collect from odd jobs or discarded cans were spent carefully, stretched to buy the cheapest scraps of food he could find. But hunger wasn't the only enemy, it was loneliness. The world had turned its back on him. People walked past without a glance, as if he was invisible. Some looked at him with suspicion, others with disgust, and only a rare few showed kindness. That constant rejection stung more than the biting wind that pierced through his jacket at night. Yet, in the middle of his darkest moments, Armin clung to one thought: this is not forever. He whispered it to himself when his stomach growled, when sleep wouldn't come, when his body trembled against the cold concrete. It was a fragile hope, but it was all he had. Little did he know that this fragile hope would one day become the fuel for a transformation no one could have imagined. A spark of hope. One evening, after another exhausting day of wandering aimlessly, Armin stumbled into a public library. At first, he only wanted shelter from the biting cold outside. The warmth of the building felt like a blessing, and the quiet atmosphere gave him a strange sense of peace he hadn't felt in months. He found a corner chair, tucked his backpack beside him, and closed his eyes, pretending to read just so no one would ask him to leave. But when he opened his eyes, something caught his attention: a shelf filled with books on success, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. Out of boredom more than anything else, he picked up a book. As he flipped through the pages, he began to see words that spoke directly to him. Stories of men and women who had started with nothing and built empires. Lessons about persistence, discipline, and vision. For the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of possibility. If others could climb out of the darkness, maybe he could too. That night, instead of feeling defeated, he carried with him a new thought. Maybe I'm not finished yet. Maybe I'm just getting started. The library soon became his secret refuge. Every morning, when the doors opened, he slipped inside. He read for hours, business books, motivational stories, even guides on basic money management. Each book became a mentor, each page a reminder that knowledge was a form of power no one could take from him. He took notes on scraps of paper he found in the trash, jotting down ideas, strategies, and quotes that inspired him. While others saw only a homeless man sitting quietly in the corner, Armin knew he was planting seeds inside his mind. This new habit began to change him. His shoulders stood a little straighter, his eyes carried a new focus, and even though he was still sleeping on cold sidewalks, he started dreaming again. Not the desperate dreams of escape, but the determined vision of building a better future. That spark of hope, born in the silence of a library, was about to light the fire that would change his life forever. The first step forward. Knowledge without action means nothing, and Armin knew this. The books gave him ideas, but ideas alone couldn't fill his stomach or change his future. He needed money, any amount, no matter how small, to create a stepping stone. So he swallowed his pride and started searching for work. It wasn't glamorous. He washed dishes in small diners, swept floors in corner shops, carried heavy boxes for strangers who didn't even bother to thank him. Sometimes, the pay was just a few dollars or a leftover meal. But Armin learned to accept every opportunity, no matter how insignificant it seemed. He wasn't chasing comfort. He was chasing survival. And slowly, something inside him shifted. Where others saw demeaning chores, Armin saw training. Every dish he scrubbed taught him discipline. Every floor he cleaned reminded him of humility. Every coin he earned was proof that he wasn't powerless. For the first time in months, he wasn't just waiting for life to change. He was moving toward change. He lived frugally. No luxuries, no unnecessary spending. If he earned $5, he tried to save $3. He cut corners wherever possible, sometimes choosing hunger over wasting money on cheap junk food. What little he saved, he guarded with determination, because he understood that each dollar was not just currency, it was a seed for his future. Meanwhile, he kept feeding his mind. After exhausting days of physical labor, he would still drag himself to the library, open a book, and study. He learned about entrepreneurship, marketing, and the basics of running a business. He watched free tutorials on public computers, took notes, and created plans in his notebook. Many nights, as he lay on the cold ground clutching his backpack, he imagined a different life. Not just to escape poverty, but to build something meaningful, something that would prove that he was more than his circumstances. Those dreams became his fuel. Every small job, every dollar saved, every word he read, it all became part of the foundation. Armin was no longer just surviving. He was preparing. And though he couldn't see it yet, those tiny steps forward were leading him to a breakthrough far greater than he could ever imagine. Building the dream. With a small amount of savings tucked away and a head full of knowledge, Armin knew it was time to take his first real leap. He didn't have much, but he had enough to buy a second-hand laptop. It was old, the keyboard missing a few keys, the screen flickering at times, but to him, it was more valuable than gold. That laptop became his window to the world, and the tool that would change his destiny. Armin started small. He explored the digital marketplace, selling items online, and offering tiny freelance services he had taught himself through hours of research. At first, it felt almost hopeless. Orders barely came in, and when they did, the payments were so little they hardly seemed worth the effort. But Armin reminded himself of one promise: never quit. He treated every small transaction as if it were worth $1 million. He responded quickly, worked tirelessly, and delivered better than what was expected. Slowly, reviews came in. One customer recommended him to another, then another, and little by little, his tiny trickle of income began to grow. Still, the journey was not easy. For every success, there were setbacks. Sometimes his internet connection would cut off while he was working at a cafe. Sometimes clients disappeared without paying. Some nights he felt so exhausted he wanted to give up. But then he would remember the cold pavements, the empty stomachs, the way people ignored him when he was invisible. That memory became his fire. Instead of spending his early earnings on comfort, Armin reinvested everything. He bought better tools, upgraded his laptop, and even paid for online courses to sharpen his skills. The more he learned, the better he became. His services improved, his products reached more people, and his small online hustle began to transform into a real business. Months turned into years, and the progress became undeniable. From earning a few dollars a day, Armin was now making thousands every month. He went from worrying about his next meal to carefully managing profits, building systems, and creating opportunities not just for himself, but for others as well. He was no longer the homeless man that society ignored. He was a builder of dreams, of businesses, of a future he had once only read about in the quiet corners of a library. But the story wasn't over yet. The world was about to witness a transformation so remarkable that even Armin himself sometimes struggled to believe it was real. From pavement to penthouse, years of relentless effort began to pay off in ways Armin had once only dreamed of. The man who once collected spare change for survival was now signing contracts worth more than he used to see in an entire year. His business, which started with a beat-up laptop and free Wi-Fi at cafes, had grown into a thriving company that reached customers around the world. Armin moved into his first real apartment, a modest one-bedroom place. To anyone else, it was ordinary, but for him it was sacred. He remembered the nights of sleeping on cold sidewalks, and now here he was, turning a key to open a door that was truly his. That first night, he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, tears rolling down his face, whispering to himself, "I made it off the streets." But he didn't stop there. Success only fueled him to dream bigger. With discipline and vision, he reinvested, expanded his businesses, and soon entered industries he had once only read about in those library books. His income multiplied, his influence grew, and his name began to carry weight. Armin bought his mother a home, supported charities for the homeless, and even funded education programs for struggling kids who reminded him of himself. He understood what it meant to have nothing, and he wanted to make sure others had a fighting chance at building something. Years later, he stood in the penthouse of a skyscraper, gazing out at the same city that once forced him to sleep under bridges. The streets below were still there, the same streets that had once broken him, but now he looked at them from a place of strength. It was surreal, how life had taken him from invisibility to influence, from despair to destiny. He knew now that wealth wasn't just about money. The real treasure was the transformation, the courage he had discovered in himself, the lessons hardship had carved into his soul, and the belief that no obstacle was permanent. Armin's journey had come full circle, from the pavement to the penthouse, from being unseen to becoming unstoppable. And his life stood as living proof of one undeniable truth: your past does not define your future, your choices do. Armin's journey proves one powerful truth: your current situation does not decide your future, your mindset does. You can be broke, homeless, invisible to the world, and still rise to heights no one thought possible. Success is not about luck or being born into wealth. It's about refusing to quit when life breaks you, about learning when the world tells you you're worthless, and about taking tiny steps forward, even when no one believes in you. If a man can go from sleeping on sidewalks to owning million-dollar businesses, then what's stopping you? The only limits are the ones you accept. Choose persistence over excuses. Choose growth over comfort. Choose to fight for the life you deserve. Because at the end of the day, rock bottom isn't where your story ends. It's where your comeback begins.